Today, we're wading into some pretty charged territory. We're looking at a big law enforcement action out of Florida, maybe the most talked about operation this year. It got a lot of press, a lot of debate online, and it had this, well, very provocative federal code name.
Yeah, and our job today is really to cut through all that noise. There's a ton of it. We're working from a mix of sources here. You've got the official DHS press releases, reports from the local sheriff, news coverage, and, like you said, some really heated public reaction.
Right. So the goal for you listening is to get the facts straight. What actually happened? What did officials claim? And maybe most importantly, what's the context around the numbers and how this whole thing was framed politically? We really have to start with that name. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem called it Operation Dirtbag.
Operation Dirtbag. I mean, it's not exactly subtle, is it? It immediately paints a picture. Violent criminals, specifically illegal aliens, who were, and this was emphasized, targeting children.
Yeah. That framing, right from the get-go, really shaped how people saw it and how it played into the wider political arguments. Okay, let's unpack the actual mechanics then. Before we get tangled in the numbers, how was this thing structured? What happened on the ground?
So the official umbrella name was actually Operation Criminal Return, a bit more formal. But the specific action we're talking about was run as a joint task force. The main agency, the one really driving the investigation, was the local Polk County Sheriff's Department, the PCSO down in Florida.
And they weren't alone.
No, definitely not. They had significant support, boots-on-the-ground help from federal agencies. DHS was involved. ICE Immigration and Customs Enforcement was a key partner.
And the way they caught people, particularly the sex offenders, as some sources mentioned, it felt, well, familiar.
It did, yeah. Several reports pointed out that the tactics, especially for the predator stings, were very much like those used in shows like, the old To Catch a Predator. Okay. And that makes sense. The Polk County Sheriff, Grady Judd, he's pretty well known for these kinds of operations. He's even worked publicly with people like Chris Hansen before on similar stings.
So it's local law enforcement using these established sting methods, then looping in the federal agencies for the immigration side.
Exactly. That's the basic model. Local investigation, federal backup for the immigration enforcement piece.
Okay, so that setup helps explain why the claims of success were so potent. They weren't just rounding people up, they were running sophisticated stings. What were the big numbers the federal government was putting out there?
The numbers pushed at the federal level, DHS and the White House, were pretty dramatic. They kept highlighting the arrest of more than 150 illegal alien sex offenders. Those were the headline figure. And this was often presented as part of a larger sweep, netting supposedly over 230 criminal illegal aliens in total.
And the crimes alleged were, deeply unsettling.
Absolutely. They made sure to list the kinds of offenses to really underscore the danger. We're talking sexual assault of minors, rape, lewd and lascivious conduct, child exploitation, battery, even attempted homicide. The message was clear. These are dangerous individuals.
Let's maybe put a face on that, so to speak. The sources highlighted a few specific cases, right? To give a sense of who they were targeting.
They did. It helps ground the discussion. For example, there was Sergio Velasquez Carnero, originally from Cuba, who was convicted for fondling a child. Then Victor Julio Silva Diaz from Venezuela, convicted of aggravated criminal sexual abuse of a child. And Andrei Kurbatov, an illegal alien from Ukraine, convicted for receiving and possessing child sexual abuse material. These are the kinds of cases held up as justifying the operation.
Okay. Now, this is where, like you said, the noise starts, because almost immediately after those federal announcements, the actual numbers started getting questioned. This is where the political spin seems to diverge from maybe the raw data from the local level.
This is absolutely the core of the confusion and the debate. You have DHS hammering this 150-plus illegal alien sex offenders number, but then you look at what the agency running the operation reported locally, and it's different.
What's the Polk County Sheriff's Office say?
So the PCSO put out a release detailing their entire 7-day operation focused on human trafficking and sexual predators. They reported arresting 246 suspects in total. That's everybody, citizens, legal residents, everyone they caught during that week. But crucially, they specified that only 46 of those 246 suspects were identified as being illegal immigrants. Wait, hang on, 46 out of 246 total. So less than 1 in 5. About, what, 18, 19%?
Roughly 18.6%, yeah.
That's a massive gap compared to the over 150 figure the federal government was using for illegal alien sex offenders. How does that even happen?
Right, and that discrepancy immediately became the flashpoint. It really suggests a deliberate framing depending on the audience. Maybe the federal number was rolling in people from previous related actions, or perhaps counting anyone targeted for a sex offense, even if arrested on a different immigration charge. It's not entirely clear from the sources, but the local agency, reporting on that specific week-long sting, gave the number 46 for illegal immigrants arrested. So if the stated goal was targeting violent illegal aliens, the feds seem to be packaging the stats quite broadly, and the critics jumped on this, didn't they, calling it potentially dishonest or propaganda?
They did. The argument was that focusing only on that inflated 150-plus number, which got picked up by some news outlets without much questioning, well, it served a political purpose, to bolster the case for much stricter, broader immigration enforcement by highlighting a severe criminal alien threat. Critics said ignoring the fact that over 200 other people, likely citizens or legal residents, were arrested in the same operation makes it look less like pure public safety and more like a political tool.
It's fascinating because technically both sides could claim factual accuracy depending on how you slice the data. The feds say we caught over 150 dangerous illegal alien sex offenders, maybe counting related cases or different time frames. The local sheriff says we arrested 246 predators this week, 46 of whom were illegal immigrants. Both statements might be true in isolation.
Exactly. And that's why context is everything. Now, the counter from Secretary Noem and supporters was, look, whether it's 46 or 150, these are dangerous people who should have never been on our country to begin with. Her argument essentially was that any number of such individuals validates their enforcement focus. She also broadened it out, stating that overall, something like 70% of immigrants arrested by the administration have criminal convictions or pending charges, trying to frame their efforts as targeted at crime.
Okay, so this numbers debate naturally leads to the how. How did they achieve this sweep, and what does it mean for immigration enforcement more broadly?
Right. We need to talk about the mechanism behind it, and that means talking about President Trump's 287G agreements. Operation Dirtbag leaned heavily on this program. It's a really important policy piece.
Can you just briefly explain what 287G actually allows?
Yeah, sure. In simple terms, it allows state and local law enforcement agencies, like the Polk County Sheriff's Office here, to make formal agreements with the federal government, specifically with ICE. And these agreements essentially give designated local officers the training and authority to perform federal immigration enforcement duties.
So a local deputy could potentially investigate someone's immigration status, detain them for an immigration violation, and start the process for deportation.
That's the core idea. It deputizes them, in a sense, to act as immigration agents within certain limits. And Secretary Noem was very clear. She pointed to this Polk County partnership as a model we want to replicate across the country. The success of Dirtbag in removing those dangerous individuals becomes the Exhibit A for why 287G works and should be expanded.
But extending that power brings up the resource question again. The critics, what was their main argument there?
The main pushback you see in the sources is this. If the goal is truly public safety, getting rapists and child predators off the streets, then why use these enhanced 287G resources of partnerships to also target people whose only violation is being undocumented, which is, technically a civil offense, not a criminal one.
Right.
The argument is that using what they called a ridiculous amount of resources for civil immigration enforcement detracts from focusing solely on violent crime.
Yeah.
They say it leads to harassing communities rather than just targeting dangerous criminals. Divert all that effort to the truly bad guys.
And beyond just resources and priorities, there were deeper legal concerns raised too, weren't there? Constitutional worries.
Yes, and this is a really significant point. So the commentary we reviewed, there were serious concerns raised about due process, specifically about the potential suspension of habeas corpus rights in the context of these rapid deportation processes.
Okay, habeas corpus. Can you break that down for us? What does that mean in practical terms here?
So habeas corpus is a fundamental legal principle. It's basically your right to go before a court and have the government justify why it's holding you, why you're detained. It's a safeguard against unlawful imprisonment. The concern raised in the sources is that with programs like 287G potentially leading to very quick detentions and deportations, individuals might be removed from the country before they have a meaningful chance to exercise that right.
Before they can challenge the legality of their detention itself.
Exactly. Or before their alleged crime is fully adjudicated in a U.S. court, or even before victims get justice here. The fear is that the push for swift removal might bypass some of these fundamental checks.
So, the undeniable success of catching a dangerous criminal is put right up against these fundamental questions of due process. Now, zooming back out a bit, did Secretary Noem connect this Florida operation to successes elsewhere?
She did. She presented data suggesting that similar types of targeted enforcement surges in other cities, like Chicago, were correlating with drops in crime rates. She cited specific figures for Chicago homicide down 16%, shootings down 35%, robberies down 41% in targeted areas, to argue that this kind of strict immigration enforcement directly improves public safety overall.
And one last piece from the sources, it wasn't just about enforcement, right? They also touched on legal immigration.
That's right. Secretary Noem also made a point to say the administration would continue using legal immigration pathways, like H-1B visas for skilled workers and other visa programs. But she stressed the focus would be on much more rigorous vetting and ensuring the integrity of the system, the stated goal being to make sure legal immigrants are here for the right reasons and to prevent entry of anyone deemed a security risk, like supporters of terrorism.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it leaves us in a really complex spot. On one hand, you have what seems like an objectively successful operation in terms of public safety, removing genuinely dangerous people, child predators, from the community. That's hard to argue against.
Absolutely. A clear win in that sense. But, as we've seen, that success story is immediately tangled up in debates about how the numbers were presented, the political motivations, and the very mechanism 287G used to achieve it. So the key takeaway for you listening, really, is that operations like Dirtbag demand a closer look. You have to look past the headline number, whether it's 150 or 46, understand who is reporting what, and see how these actions are used to justify broader policies like expanding 287.
And that really sets up our final thought for you to consider. The sources show this real tension, don't they, between the immediate gut-level satisfaction of catching violent criminals getting dirtbags off the street and these bigger systemic questions about due process, resource allocation, and the focus of federal immigration enforcement. So the question becomes, how does the success of a targeted focus operation like this one end up influencing or maybe even overshadowing the larger national conversation about how we should use law enforcement resources when it comes to broader non-criminal immigration issues? Where do you draw that line? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Until next time.
Thanks for diving deep with us.